its dharma, incomparably profound, minutely subtle, is rarely encountered, even in hundreds of thousands of millions of ages. Now we see it, hear it, hold and maintain it. May we completely realize the Tathagata's true meaning.
So this may be a little rough around the edges, but I'll give it my best. I start with a disclaimer, which is that I'm not a scholar of the Heart Sutra. I'm not an expert on the Heart Sutra. It has been meaningful to me personally in my practice, and I do understand what it's getting at least in part. So with that disclaimer, when you finish hearing these talks, you'll probably know more than you knew before, but you won't know everything. There are whole books written on, on this Heart Sutra. Some of them are in our library if you're really interested and want to follow up on it. This week's talk is not really on the sutra that we chant. I'm sorry, my voice is probably not going to get any better. It's not really on the sutra that we chant. It's on the title. And what you probably did not know is that there's an introduction to this Heart Sutra, which we don't chant. The next talk, we'll start with actually what we usually chant each week, Avalokiteshvara, doing deep prajna, paramita, etc. So Heart Sutra is actually not the full title of the sutra. The full title is Sutra on the Heart of Transcendent and Victorious Perfection of Wisdom. The Heart Sutra is one of the most commonly recited sutras in Mahayana Buddhism. It's definitely a Mahayana sutra. We'll get into that later, how it came about and why it's particularly Mahayana. Probably at every moment of the day and night, somewhere around the world, the Heart Sutra is being chanted by Buddhists. It's called Heart Sutra, not because it's a warm and fuzzy thing, but because it's the heart of the matter. It's the essence. Supposedly in these short lines that we chant is explained the core beliefs of Mahayana Buddhism. It contains it all, so they say. There is a very vast body of sutras known as the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And these include sutras such as Nirvana Sutra, Lotus Sutra, Avatamsaka Sutra, Lankavatara Sutra, and the actual Heart Sutra. Some of these sutras we've talked about in various talks throughout the years. And supposedly it's a distillation of the teachings. So when we say it, the Jikita says Maha Prajna Paramita Heart Sutra, and what this means is Maha means great, Prajna means wisdom, And paramita means the ultimate wisdom, or the wisdom of the other shore. And sutra is just, Buddhist writings are called sutras. Maybe equivalent to a chapter of the Bible, or maybe equivalent to a chapter of St. Thomas Aquinas or something like that. So wisdom in the Heart Sutra means not everyday, ordinary wisdom. It means to go beyond mundane wisdom to ultimate wisdom. And according to Buddhism, this ultimate wisdom is a non-dual wisdom. It's the wisdom that everything is one. That there's no difference between form and emptiness, which the sutra tells you several times. This paramita, beyond the far shore, means beyond the far shore of enlightenment. This is why the final mantra of the sutra is gate, gate, para gate, parasam gate, bodhiswaha. And it's saying go quickly, go beyond the shore. This, perhaps, I'm not sure if this is true, but perhaps it comes from the story that's told of Buddha's description of enlightenment and practice. What he says, when you use a raft to cross the river, and you get to the other shore, which in Buddhism the other shore is enlightenment, then you don't need the raft anymore. You let that go, and you live out the wisdom of your enlightenment. So the far shore in Buddhist terms would be nirvana. So according to the Heart Sutra and many other sources in Buddhism, to get to the far shore, you have to take this non-dual wisdom and don't hold on to any idea. There is some discussion in studies of the sutra about whether Buddha is the only one who has gotten there to the perfection of wisdom, and the rest of us are just somewhere along the way. Not everyone holds to this, but it is part of discussion. So I'm going to read you now the prologue that we do not chant. What you have to realize is that there must be hundreds and hundreds of translations of this sutra, which was, of course, originally written in Pali. So since we do not chant this part, I had to find a translation from some other source. So the language used in it is slightly different than we use in our version of the sutra, but you'll recognize it. So this is what it says. It says, "Thus did I hear at one time, the transcendent victor was sitting on Vulture Peak in Rajarata, together with a great assembly of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. At that time, the transcendent victor was absorbed in a samadhi on the enumerations of phenomenon called perception of the profound." And then it goes on to say, "Then, by the power of Buddha, the Venerable Sariputra said to the Buddha, the Mahasattva, the superior Avalokiteshvara, How should the son of good lineage, who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom, okay, so that's that. And then it gets down to the part that we do actually chant, starting out with Avalokiteshvara. But this is the preliminary part that we don't chant. So let's talk about this a little bit. You'll be perhaps surprised to hear, as I was, that there's controversy about almost every single word in here. And that's true of the Sutra as a whole. There are chapters and verses and long discussions about who disagrees with whom and so on. There have been commentaries on the Heart Sutra way back to ancient practitioners. So the first thing there's controversy about is thus. Thus did I hear at one time. The controversy here is, does thus mean what it usually means in ordinary parlance in English, or does it mean thus in the Buddhist sense? So you can make up your own mind about that. This did I hear at one time. There's also controversy about hear. Does hear mean that they just heard it, oral in their ear, or that they heard it, that they got it, that they realized it? And at one time anchors it in a particular historical time. And then the very next line anchors it in a particular historical place, because it says the transcended victor is Buddha, was sitting on Vulture Peak in Rajarata. So this was a favorite place of Buddha for giving talks. He would sit on Vulture Peak, and the monks and whoever would gather, and he would give his talks here. So now we've got it, planted in a particular time, in a particular place. And now it tells us that a great assembly, tells us who is there, a great assembly of monks and a great assembly of bodhisattvas. So this is very Buddhist to, pin it down to the everyday description of where, when, and how. It's also meant to codify it as, words that were actually spoken, and so as legitimate teachings. This is a big issue in Buddhism, especially in Mahayana Buddhism. Are these sutras authentic? Are they authentic teachings of the Buddha? Often the sutra will start out by saying that Buddha said it. But these sutras were written, 400 years after, after Buddha died. So you gotta figure, in what way did he say it? He certainly didn't say it personally. And so did he say it by, allowing a practitioner to realize it based on his original teaching? Does that constitute him saying it, or does it not? So that's an issue. Shariputra, who appears in this sutra, was one of the Buddha's foremost disciples. So we have to know that if he was the disciple of Buddha when Buddha was living, that he was also dead by this time. Yet we have him in the sutra asking a question. Shariputra is often the fall guy in these sutras. He either says something very brilliant or something very dumb. Here he's asking a question. So what it tells us that's happening in this particular time and place is, it says, at that time, the transcendent victor was absorbed in a samadhi on the enumerations of phenomenon called perception of the profound. So the perfection of the profound is like prajna wisdom. It always involves seeing emptiness, the emptiness of all things, and and ultimately is involved with not getting stuck there. So Buddha's having this deep samadhi. Early Buddhists had endless list of the kinds of samadhi and enumerate what happens in them and all of that. Theravadins sometimes still talk about that, but Zen doesn't much talk about that. Samadhi. The enumeration of who's there indicates that the audience for these teachings are distinguished. It's a distinguished audience. They're monks, they're bodhisattvas, they're mahasattvas. And this points to the fact that these teachings are very advanced. They're meant for those who already have some understanding. There are two basic schools of Buddhism, Theravada or Hinayana and Mahayana. We're part of a Mahayana school. So Mahayana often badmouth Theravadins, and according to many Mahayana teachings, the Theravadins haven't quite got this particular enumeration of phenomenon called perception of profound, that they've gotten to emptiness, but they haven't taken the next step to put these dual opposites together, this paradox. So this is a really important Mahayana teaching because they're the ones who first brought it up. So this, this prologue continues. Then by the power of Buddha, the venerable Shariputra said to the Bodhisattva, the Mahasattva, the superior Avalokiteshvara, how should a son of good lineage train who wishes to practice the profound perfection of wisdom? So Shariputra here is saying, okay, now you're giving us this very advanced teaching, this very profound teaching. How should I practice it? What should I do if I want to realize this? So as I said, Shariputra is one of Buddha's foremost disciples. Most often he's depicted as a monk, but he's also sometimes pictured as a lay person. There were two of Buddha's famous disciples. Shariputra was one, and Moldijana, I think is how you pronounce it, it was the other one. Shariputra was considered first, and the other one was like the second rank. And in Asia, you often see statues. There'll be a big statue of Buddha in the middle, and then there'll be these two main monks flanking him on either side. We know quite a bit about Shariputra, whether he was a real person or whether this is a made-up thing, we're not entirely sure. Some of it seems to be accurate. And in the Vinaya, which is the records of the very early Sangha, there's a whole part depicting the conversion of Shariputra to Buddhism. Buddha is predicted to say, as reported as saying this: "You are wise, Shariputra, great and wide is your wisdom, joyful and quick is your wisdom, sharp and analytical is your wisdom." I'm not sure what word they translated as analytical, but there's a little blow to people who think, you should read the sutras and think about it. So he's pictured not only as accomplished, but eager to question and learn. He's always appearing in these sutras, raising his hand. He's probably the student you hate in class. He has wisdom, but generally in these sutras, he's portrayed as lacking the final wisdom. He hasn't quite got it yet. Sometimes he's shown as naive and foolish. In the Lotus Sutra, there is some material that depicts Shariputra as finally getting it. So we cheer him on. This introduction goes on to say this. At that time, the Bodhisattva, the Mahasattva, the superior Avalokiteshvara was contemplating the meaning of the profound perfection of wisdom, and he saw that the five aggregates are also empty of inherent existence. So this is where our sutra begins. It's telling us here that it's Buddha who's seeing this, but our sutra starts with Avalokiteshvara and says that she sees this. Avalokiteshvara, doing deep prajna paramita, clearly saw emptiness of all the five conditions. Our sutra is calling it conditions. The sutra is calling it the aggregates. And so this is where our sutra begins. So, I'm going to stop there. And at the end of our meeting today, we will chant the Heart Sutra again. And next week we'll start where we do start in our chant with Avalokiteshvara, who is, most of you know, the Bodhisattva of compassion. In this introduction, they're speaking of Buddha as though he is the Avalokiteshvara. He is an Avalokiteshvara, as any of us have a chance to be a Bodhisattva of compassion. But our sutra starts off as though it's the Bodhisattva of compassion, who is not a historical figure. But they, we tend to act as though there's one. And there are lots of statues of her, and sometimes she's depicted as a male as well. It's indeterminate. So I hope you learned something today.